Hello, and thank you for joining me. Well, this is the Tuesday, January 17th edition of our video devotionals. We appreciate you being with us today. Hope your Tuesday's going well. And we call this Thankful Tuesday. And we do have a lot to be thankful for. And so we appreciate you joining us today. And we're going to be in the last chapter of Genesis today. So we're going to finish our first book of the Bible as we're reading through it in 1 year's time. And so turn to Genesis 50, if you will, and we will go through just a few verses there. Otherwise, we're going to read from our Today book. I'm actually going to read just a few things from yesterday since I didn't have it with me. So this is just a little book that compiled historic events that happen on each day of the year. This book's old, somewhat old. It was, I think, last copyrighted in 1970. So I realize there's a lot of events that have happened since then that could be added to this. But anyway, some of these you'll be familiar with and some you won't be. It's just interesting, some of the things that are compiled in this book. So yesterday, January 16th, it says the University of North Carolina was opened in 1795. So it is one of our older universities, and of course I live here in North Carolina, and people's familiar with UNC, University of North Carolina. So a very, very old institution of learning. In 1883, the civil service began. In 1920, the date of the Prohibition Amendment. That's when alcohol beverages was outlawed, and I forget how long it lasted. I know it was years, but at any rate, that's when that occurred in 1920. 1944, General Eisenhower assumed the Allied command in England. And then Isaac Newton was born in 1642. All right, today's day, here's an interesting one. In 1706, this is the birthday of Benjamin Franklin. Now, he was not one of our presidents, but he's, as far as a founding father goes, he's about as famous as any of the presidents of his day. But he had a lot of wisdom and had a lot of influence in helping the country get started. But here's what it says, a little excerpt about Benjamin Franklin. It says, on the tombstone of Benjamin Franklin, it is supposedly written, "Here lies all that could die of Benjamin Franklin." Someone has said that he wrote before his death something like this: "Here lies the body of Benjamin Franklin, like an old book, tattered and worn, but it shall appear again in a new edition, as revised and corrected by the author." So again, Benjamin Franklin, great American. He was a scientist. I think most of us, especially as a kid, we remember hearing about Benjamin Franklin taking a kite and running a key up, I guess tying the key up close to where the kite was, and was flying that in a thunderstorm. And, I don't know if lightning struck I don't remember the exact story, and I hope this is not a myth, but at any rate, supposedly it goes that he, maybe he felt a tingle down the line, because if it's wet, then, water conducts electricity. So anyway, so Benjamin Franklin, and of course he's on our currency and all of that. Let's see here. I think that's all we have for today. So that's just some things that happened around yesterday and today's date in history. All right, well, let's go to the Bible. And before we do that, again, thank you for all who have prayed for me. And I think I'm pretty much past my sickness. In fact, today, even compared to yesterday, doing a lot better. So it seems like the getting well part is starting to kind of speed up a little bit. And hopefully, I won't have a back set. That's what my mom used to call it, a setback or a back set. And so I want to be careful about that, because I certainly don't want it. And I know others have had to deal with that, and I hope I don't want to deal with that. So at any rate. All right, so here's the last chapter of the book of Genesis, Genesis 50. At this point, Jacob has passed, Israel has passed away, and the brothers, of course, are very, very worried about how Joseph is going to treat them now that dad has died, and knowing, of course, what they had done to Joseph. So here's what it says here in verse 19 of chapter 50. "And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them." So then the story ends, of course, Joseph's going to die. And then Exodus will kind of begin with those children of Israel being down there in Egypt. And I think they end up being there about 430 years total. But here's what we want to talk about today. There are things that people do to us, and they mean evil. In some cases, they mean harm. But it's interesting how God can take something that someone else in their own mind has schemed and actually made happen in the human sense to do harm or to bring some kind of even just a displeasure or something to someone else. Sadly, this was brothers against a brother. But Joseph said, "Look," he said, "I know you meant it evil unto me, but God meant it for good to save much people alive." In other words, God took that negative and turned it to a great positive, and not just for Joseph, but many people, the known world really. And so, when you hear about that, you have to trust God when things happen. And if you're going to live for God, godly people are going to suffer persecution one way or another. It may not be to the extent of Joseph and what he's gone through, but it does happen, and it may happen. And if it does, we have to realize that, number one, God's always in control. God's always in charge. God allows things to happen. There's no doubt about it. And sometimes God even orchestrates things and puts us through the trial itself. And then God certainly can look at people and they make their decisions to go against somebody. So if there's a situation in which you find yourself, especially because you're trying to do right, you're trying to live for God. Sometimes this happens like in a workplace. You've got employers. Sometimes they don't like your Christian stance. They don't like the fact that you have a Christian testimony. They certainly don't mind you working hard for them and producing so that they have money and they go forward as a company. But there's something about people that if they're not godly, they want to go against the godly. And if you find yourself in a position where it seems like someone does something against you in that situation, you say, "Man, I can't believe this." Then you realize there's a God, and if something happens, then sometimes it becomes something even much greater. In this case, just like Joseph. So all that to say, there's many examples, and I'm sure there's people listening to this. You could give an example of that. And I know in my own life, I've tried to live for God. There's been times that has because of that, not because I was a bad employee or a bad person. I know we're all human, but because of my stand for God and the things I've done or would not do, then we use the term it may have cost me something, but really, no, it don't cost me anything to live for God. It's a pleasure, it's a blessing. God takes care of us. He's taking care of me, and I know He's taking care of you if you've lived for God. But bear in mind, there are people who mean things against you, and God can take that and certainly make it much more than not just compensate you, but even make other people benefit from what you've had to go through. So you think about that, and I hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday and to be as safe and as healthy as you can be. Tomorrow we'll be coming back with Winning Wednesday. We'll begin the book of Exodus, and we'll go through that. So have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.